Get Rich Education is brought to you by Mid-South Homebuyers and TheLandGeek.com.
Welcome to Get Rich Education with Keith Weinhold, giving you information and ideas on the investment that has turned more ordinary people into millionaires and billionaires than anything else, and can provide you with more wealth and happiness than you ever thought possible. Now, here's your host, investor, entrepreneur, business owner, and educator, Keith Weinhold.
Welcome to Get Rich Education. I'm your host, Keith Weinhold. This is the FourPlex show on episode 44. Yes, GRE strikes back for another wealth-building week, and I'm a whole lot friendlier than any of those scoundrels from the Empire. I'm glad you're here, and I'm here because I want to make you more successful than me, faster than me. Well, what is a fourplex building, and how could owning a fourplex yourself be your wealth building breakthrough, or even be one of the worst decisions of your life, okay? You know, at times I need to speak in generalities today. Sometimes there are rare exceptions to rules, and if I have to mention every last caveat before we move on, we won't get anywhere. Look, this is not an episode about passive real estate investing, okay? I want to make that clear. This approach takes some work, but it can be a relatively small amount of work for a massive financial benefit, okay? Now, I think you know by now that I started in real estate investing by buying a fourplex building. That was back in 2002. I lived in one unit, rented out the other three. Now, that's the first quote-unquote home I ever owned, all right? A fourplex is 4 dwelling units attached to each other in one structure, okay? It's a small apartment building where 4 families live. I specifically helped a lot of beginning investors start off with a fourplex. In fact, my property manager here in Anchorage was recently remarking at the high price of fourplexes around here lately, saying that at this point, wannabe buyers are willing to eat the paint off the outside of a fourplex just to get inside to take a look at one to buy, okay? I can't really take sole responsibility for that condition, but, you know, I probably have been a contributor. Well, what makes 4 units in one building so special? Why not buy a 2-unit property, or why not a building of 6 or 8 units? Well, for one thing, the more units in a building, the more profitable generally, okay? Well, the top reason that fourplexes optimize helping you do more with less is this: financing. That's the number one reason. You can buy a 1, 2, 3, or up to a 4-unit property with an FHA loan, where you only have to make a 3.5% down payment to own, control, and live in the property, okay? Well, then why aren't more people doing this? Just plain and simple, most people just don't know. No one gives them the idea. Now, by the way, with VA loans, Veterans Administration loans, in your military service, you can buy a fourplex with 0% down, okay? But we're going to focus on the FHA 3.5% down loan today because there's a better chance that you qualify for it. It doesn't take any military service or anything. Some people think it costs a lot to invest in real estate, especially to buy a 4-unit apartment building, but it does not. Now, if you buy a property of 5 or more units in it, that's much different than a residential loan program. On a 5+ unit property, you need to put 20 to 25% down on a property, and that's more than most people can afford. Plus, lenders for those properties usually require that you have income property experience on a resume. Most people that use the 3.5% down FHA loan merely use it for a single-family home and don't even realize that you can use it for a fourplex building. FHA is Federal Housing Administration, okay? It's a low down payment program backed by the federal government, and it encourages home ownership in this country. You only need a minimum credit score of 580, and you must live in one of the units yourself for 12 months to get the financing. You can only get one FHA loan at a time unless there are some extenuating circumstances, okay? Now, with FHA, you typically need to pay a few $100s per month for mortgage insurance that protects the lender from a loss in case you default. Buying a Four-Plex magnifies your economies of scale over the smaller properties like a 1, 2, or 3 unit building. It maximizes your rent-to-value ratio, and that's the chief indicator of what makes for a profitable property. And by the way, it seems that a minority of people call Four-Plexes quads or even a quadplex. I don't know if that's a regional thing or what, but anyone that calls it a quad never stops calling it a quad and will never call it a Four-Plex, okay? So we won't correct them. Anyway, owning a Four-Plex building rather than a duplex or triplex, it also provides you with more stable income. If you have a duplex building where you live on one side of the duplex and rent out the other side, and that other side's vacant for a month, you're paying for all of that building's expenses for the month. Well, when you live in one Four-Plex unit and rent out the other 3, and one of those other 3 is vacant, well, at least you've still got 2/3 of the rent income to help pay the building's expenses, okay? It's more stable. Now, you might have a couple objections to buying a Four-Plex building this way. One is that you don't think you can afford it because a Four-Plex costs more than a comparable single-family home. And another objection you might have is that you're thinking, I just kind of want more privacy than that. I don't want to be living that close to my tenants. And that's probably an even more valid objection, but let's touch on each one of those, okay? First of all, with affordability, realize that before you even own the building, you can typically use 75% of the existing building tenant's rent income to qualify for the purchase of your property. Yeah. All right. How does that work? Say, for example, that you know you can qualify to buy a single-family home as a primary residence, and you qualify for up to $250,000 in a single-family home. That's the most you can afford. You've already checked with your lender. Say that's true. $250K is the most you can do. And you thought about buying a $400,000 Four-Plex, but you're afraid that you just couldn't afford that on your income. You've looked into this. Well, if you buy the Four-Plex, you will occupy one of the 4 units. If the other 3 units have a tenant paying a rent of $1,000 in each of those 3 units, or $3,000 of monthly rent income, then you can use 75% of that $3,000, which is $2,250 monthly, and you can add that $2,250 to your personal income toward your loan qualification for the Four-Plex. Yes, you can do that before you even own the building. You'll just show your lender the existing tenant's leases that the seller supplies to you. I mean, do you even realize how special that is? Okay, so you're able to use other people's money, OPM, your future tenant's money, as your income to qualify for the property. That gives you the ability to leverage yet more of other people's money, the bank to buy the property thereafter, only to go on to use even more of other people's money, the government's, for generous tax incentives after you own the property. I mean, this is precisely how wealth is created, okay? Not just how a stable retirement is secured for you someday. I mean how wealth is created. Getting other people's money to work for you 3 ways at the same time. Not only your money to work for you 1 way at one time, which is what most people think great investing is. It's not. All right, as exciting as that is, well, what if you want more privacy than living in a Four-Plex building with 3 other tenants for at least 12 months to qualify for your FHA financing? Well, that's a valid concern. That's a personal decision. I can't tell anyone that they have to live that way, okay? First of all, it is only a minimum of 12 months. Secondly, there are a lot of different Four-Plex styles, some where you can be afforded more privacy than others. Some Four-Plexes just have one common exterior door that all the tenants walk through with 2 units upstairs, 2 units downstairs, and 1 small shared laundry room in the common area. That's what I would call an apartment-style Four-Plex building, and that has low privacy. Well, then there are other Four-Plex buildings that are set up what I call townhouse style, and I've owned a few of this type of fourplex myself. That's where there are 4 exterior doors, so that way everyone has their own private entrance from the outdoors. Typically, those doors are all on the same side of the building leading out to one sidewalk, and that way everyone has their own interior upstairs and downstairs. They have their own washer and dryer in their unit, and there might even be parking lots on both ends of the building, affording even a little bit more privacy. And some fourplexes even go further with privacy. They have individual units with exterior doors and garages, so you can drive home into your garage, walk into your unit, and never really have to see anybody if you're one of those more private people, okay? Now, if you really want to buy a single-family home, but instead live in a fourplex first for just a year, then just think, once you move out of the fourplex, now you'll have not just 3 rent incomes, but 4 rent incomes because you vacated one of those units. And now you can use those 4 rent incomes to qualify for a better single-family home than that $250,000 one that you couldn't have done unless you had that fourplex income. Now, right now, if you own and live in a single-family home at this time and you want to go buy a fourplex without living in that fourplex, you're going to have to get conventional financing and put a 25% down payment on it if you don't have any plans to live there. Okay, that can be a steep price to pay. 25% down if you don't live there versus just 3.5% down if you live there for just 12 months minimum. All right, well, say you're hearing about this and you own the single-family home that you live in and you want to move out of your single-family home into a fourplex, taking on a lower quality of life for the year to get the 3.5% down payment in the 4-unit building, okay? Well, that might work, but the lender may, just might, make you sell the single-family home because otherwise they don't believe that you would lower your standard of living by residing in the fourplex. They know that you're just going to keep living in the single-family home. Now, at last check, just some lenders were loosening up on this, okay? But that's definitely worth asking about. If you think an owner-occupied fourplex fits your lifestyle, all right, well, next you have to consider your market. Do you live in a geographic market where employment growth is expected? Is there a shortage of developable land in the area? Those things are both positive indicators where you might want to do this, where an owner-occupied fourplex might make sense. Do you live in a landlord-friendly state where you can evict a tenant in a timely fashion if you need to? Just very generally, states in the northeastern U.S. and on the West Coast have tenant-friendly laws, which would be bad for fourplex owners. In states in the Midwest and the South, they tend to have more landlord-friendly laws, which would be really good for fourplex owners. Do you live in a geographic market where the RV ratio is 1% or greater? That's a really significant question, all right? For example, will 4 units rent for a total of $4,000 a month or greater for a building with a $400,000 purchase price? All right, a lot of places in the U.S. will meet this 1% requirement, $4,000 a month of rent income divided by a $400,000 purchase price. A lot of places will meet that for a fourplex, even more so if you're, again, in the Midwest, in the South, okay? Atlanta, Chicago, Houston, Oklahoma City, those, for example, all those cities have better RV ratios than Boston, New York, coastal California, and Seattle. But there is opportunity in every market, and this is only a guideline, okay? I mean, I bought my first fourplex in Anchorage, Alaska, and it had a $3,000 monthly rent income with a $295,000 purchase price. That's a 1% plus RV ratio in a landlord-friendly jurisdiction that is not in the Midwest or South, okay? So there are exceptions. All right, let's break down a few numbers here, okay? Considering that you're putting just 3.5% down, that means you're borrowing 96.5%. Well, that's going to make for a higher mortgage payment than if you put 20% down and had a smaller 80% loan rather than borrowing 96.5%. Therefore, I'd love to see you be able to get an RV ratio of 1.1% or more. So yes, you will live in one of the units, so you don't pay yourself rent. But what I want you to do if you live in one of the 4 units is perform your cash flow analysis as if you are just another rent-paying tenant, because that's how an outside investor would analyze this property, and that's how you're going to view it after you move out of it too. Here's what I mean. Look, if while you live at the Four-Plex, you find that the building's monthly expenses exceed the income by $400, then you've got a negative monthly cash flow of $400. But if that unit that you occupy has a market rent value of $1,000 and you get the benefit of living there, then you're actually cash flow positive by $600 in reality, okay? That's a pretty sweet deal. So when you move out, you will then have positive cash flow of $600 with all 4 units paying you rent, and you can typically use that income to qualify for your next property too, okay? Now with an FHA 3.5% down payment, you have 28-to-1 leverage. All right, how do I figure that, and what exactly does that mean? Okay, this is really exciting. Since 3.5 is a percentage, I take 100 and divide it by 3.5 to come up with 28, all right? That 28-to-1 leverage ratio, that means that if the property appreciates just 5% in a year, that the rate of return on your down payment is 28 times 5. Yes, that's right. It is a 140% return on the $14,000 down payment that you put on this $400,000 Four-Plex. All right, so with that $14,000 down on the Four-Plex, after year 1, you would have turned that $14,000 into over $34,000 of equity. After just 3 years, that's $77,000 of equity, again, just at that same modest 5% appreciation rate. So wait, how does $14,000 turn into $77,000 over 3 years at just a little 5% appreciation rate? The answer is leverage, all right? You receive the appreciation on the entire value of the $400,000 Four-Plex, controlled with a tiny down payment. Oh, and there are only like 4 more benefits in addition to this. You would have the benefit of living there for free or at a discounted rate, effectively subsidized by your tenants. Plus, you would have the loan principal paid down by your tenants each month. So it's actually going to be more than $77,000 worth of equity. It's probably going to be $80-some K. Plus, you would receive all the tax benefits from a 4-unit building. They're all yours. Plus, you would enjoy the longer-term inflation hedging benefits of having a fixed-rate loan. Yes, you are starting off with a bang. So you might be wondering, is this some sort of new investing idea? No, it's been around a while. This is just plain old buy and hold real estate investing. But this is what happens when you're educated and you're strategic and you get mere modest appreciation, okay? But keep the downside potential in mind, all right? That sounded pretty exciting, but if your real estate market loses value, you could rapidly find yourself in a negative equity position accelerated by the leverage to the downside just the same way. If you own a Four-Plex in a market that's losing substantial amounts of jobs or population, you could see your building sustain both a drop in value and have units that you cannot rent to anyone simultaneously. So now you're paying a mortgage on a big building all by yourself while it loses value too. Just like C-3PO said about the Sarlacc pit, in there you will find a new definition of pain and suffering, okay? Real estate investing involves risk. Buy in a good market. That's even more important than buying the right property. You are listening to Get Rich Education. Are you looking for a way to build monthly cash flow investing in real estate, but without the typical hassles you hear about? While other people flock to compete in the house flipping and rental property markets, now could be the time to learn migraine-free real estate investing. In business for nearly 15 years, Mark Podolsky, aka the Land Geek, has unlocked the secrets to creating significant passive income by investing in raw, undeveloped land. No renters or tenants, no rodents or termites, no renovations or toilet repairs. Imagine achieving your financial goals without suffering through the constant stress that landlords and house flippers do. For more information, go to thelandgeek.com/GRE.
This is Think and Grow Rich for Women author Sharon Lechter. The best investment you can make is an investment in yourself. Listen to Get Rich Education with Keith Weinhold.
Welcome back to Get Rich Education. All right, so to best position yourself to buy a fourplex, start learning about how to get your credit score in shape. Check out myfico.com. That's in the show notes. Your best credit score will help you get the best loan terms, and it's going to get you the best mortgage insurance rates too. Once you check with your loan officer to see if buying an FHA fourplex is a financial reality for you, one way to locate a building is through the public MLS, the multiple listing service, but often the best deals just aren't there. Go to your local real estate investors meeting. Let people know you're a beginner. If you're a beginner and tell people that you're potentially interested in owner-occupying a fourplex with 3.5% down, that's a great thing to tell them. And often that meeting is where you're going to find an agent that specializes in income property and has what they call pocket listings that don't go out on the public MLS. And, this is a good time to start a relationship with a property manager too, all right? And almost no beginner ever thinks of doing this. So yes, even if you're about to buy your first ever building, which you plan to self-manage while you live there, a property manager, they can tell you what buildings might be coming up for sale from within their management portfolio. And a property manager, they can tell you so much. They can tell you what market rent amounts should be for a certain fourplex, okay? Get a property manager relationship going now. Start feeling that out. And, you'll kind of audition that manager early. So if you like them, you can have them manage the property after you've lived there your 1 year or however long you end up staying there in the fourplex, okay? Look, a good property manager, they're even going to help guide your building selection a little bit, okay? They might tell you what parts of town to avoid because the manager knows. They're the one dealing with the tenants, okay? There might be a certain rent amount stated, but can you actually collect the rent, or do you have to do so at knife point or gunpoint because it's a tough area? A manager knows. An agent, sometimes they just have an incentive to want to make the sale to you and get their commission as soon as possible. So some might have a motivation to make rougher, tougher fourplexes sound like they're great deals. A manager doesn't have that motivation, okay? Especially if that property manager knows that they're kind of auditioning to be your future manager. They want you to buy in the right place because they're going to be the ones that have to deal with your building tenants in the future if you select them to manage it after you manage it yourself during your owner occupancy period. You probably want a building that's not in a war zone, not a Class D property. You more likely want one where a tenant will care for the property. You often don't want a building that's too beautiful. Beautiful properties are just less likely to provide cash flow. It might be tempting because you have pride of ownership or you want to show your friends something, but that's not sound investment judgment, all right? You want to have tenants that would want what you would want. Good proximity to shopping, schools, parks, things like that. Now, if you find a fourplex with garages, that is a plus. Fourplex tenants tend to stuff garages with all kinds of belongings. They might even park their car outside and they just tend to stay for a while when they have all those belongings stored there. Each fourplex unit is often 2 bedrooms or 3 bedrooms, or kind of the most common unit type in a fourplex. 2 bedrooms are very common. They tend to have tenants that don't stay as long, but there are shorter vacancies between tenancies. 3-bedroom units tend to have larger families, and those people move around less often. But gosh, in a fourplex, you might be lucky to get 18 months out of a tenant before they want to move. 24 months is certainly uncommon. You're lucky if you get ones that stay that long. You will get a scant few that stay 5 or 10 years or more. The first fourplex I ever bought was a 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom townhouse style building, but the one and only bathroom inside each of the 4 units was upstairs. Well, I soon found that I could rarely get older tenants to rent from me because they didn't want to go up the stairs every time to use the bathroom. Older tenants are desirable because they stay put. They move less often, and few things kill your cash flow like vacancies between tenants. Now, you cannot age discriminate. You can't tell younger people, no, they can't rent from you because you're looking for an older person, okay? But you're not age discriminating by buying a fourplex that has bathrooms on the lower floor. Now, when I bought my second fourplex, with none of my own money, by the way, I just transferred equity from the first fourplex into the second one. Well, I bought that second one smarter. I did buy another townhouse-style building, but this time each unit had its own garage, and each unit still had 2 bedrooms, but it had 1.5 bathrooms. The half bathroom on the lower floor with the garage, that did appeal to that older demographic, and tenants stayed there longer as a result. Now, seeking out a townhouse-style building, which again is where there are 4 doors to the exterior, so everyone has their own private entrance, seeking out one of those rather than an apartment-style building, that's generally going to be better for you. You're not only going to have better privacy when you live there, but utilities are more likely to be individually metered, so tenants that pay their own utilities when a building is laid out that way is typically better for you, okay? You're just not going to have the tenants that have the window open while the air conditioner is running when they're paying for the electricity. My position is that I typically offer sellers the full asking price when I come in to buy a building. I might even offer them more than the asking price. In exchange, I ask the seller to pay as many of my closing costs as possible by writing a contract that says exactly this. The seller will pay allowable buyer's closing costs, prepaids, prorations, and all lender allowable expenses. That's the language. That minimizes your out-of-pocket cost. And what it effectively does is it enables you to borrow more at these historically low interest rates, all right? And the best way to frame that in your negotiation, this wouldn't be something in the contract though, is say, I'm willing to give the seller his or her price as long as they give me my terms. And those terms are that they pay your closing costs. Well, it's going to be their price and it's going to be my terms. That makes you sound very reasonable when you say their price, my terms, and you're still getting what's most important to you, okay? You're not being a lowballer at all, yet you're still getting what you want. And it just kind of makes you sound smart and measured. Hey, your price, my terms. Now, if you think there is some wiggle room on the price and that seller has provided you with what seems to be their lowest price, you don't have to be some loud bulldog negotiator. I mean, that's not my personal style anyway. A really powerful line for you to say is, okay, what's your bottom line? You're going to be amazed at how often a seller is going to drop their price another $10,000, $20,000 by you just saying those 4 words. What's your bottom line? All right, don't use that line first. Use it near the end of the negotiation. It's only 4 simple words. One of the times I probably would not use that line, and by the way, that line often gets relayed from you to the seller through your agents. I wouldn't use that if you're in a competitive situation and there's numerous multiple offers. Have a building inspector write a repair punch list and ask the building owner to perform all or nearly all of those repairs. They'll usually do them. And that inspection, when you hire the building inspector, that typically only costs you a few $100, and that is cheap insurance, okay? Now, one thing you'll commonly run into is that almost every seller, and gosh, this just never seems to change throughout time, every seller contends that you should pay more because the rent incomes on their building's units are currently below market. Oh, and when you buy it, you ought to be able to raise the rents as soon as you buy it. If a seller takes that aggressive line, my point to them is I'm paying money for the building now based on what it produces now. I'm not paying money now based on what it might do in the future. Okay, that doesn't make any sense. That's sort of your rebuttal there, all right? When you buy the building and try to raise the rents as soon as possible, some tenants are just going to leave even over a rent increase of as little as $50, okay? They just don't understand things like, oh, well, that's just, the rate of inflation. They don't get that. They just see that as a $50 increase, and it just annoys some of them. Yeah, and then you've got a vacancy to deal with, and you might be spending your evening screening tenants for a while, okay? Well, with the help of those negotiation tactics, once you close on an owner-occupied four-plex building, you should celebrate. That's a big day. Congratulations. You could be setting yourself up for a real financial breakthrough in your life. I mean, you're starting out how I began. You know something? You know what else you just did? You started out with a bigger bang than almost every well-known real estate investor on the planet. Yeah. Look, Rich Dad Advisor Ken McElroy's first ever purchase was a 2-unit property. Kim Kiyosaki bought a little 2-bed, 2-bath house in Portland, Oregon. Robert Kiyosaki started with a small condo on Maui. You now know about this, and you already have knowledge that few do. A fourplex that's bought right can be a springboard to your wealth, and if you're willing to live there a year, you can control all this with that astonishingly low 3.5% down, okay? The good news about buying an existing fourplex in an average or better housing market is that there's a good chance that that building is already going to be full of tenants paying you rent. And the bad news is that as well. It's already full of tenants that you did not select, okay? Dealing with them is crucial. Not only are these tenants helping you pay the building's mortgage, they're also your neighbors. You're living there for at least a year, okay? So this show, we're going to make this the first in a series of 2 fourplex shows. You'll get number 2 out of 2 with episode 45 next week, where you're going to hear about the hard part, okay? After you've closed on your fourplex, how do you deal with tenants, all right? You got a few of my street-level negotiation tactics to use with sellers today, and I'll give you more of those type of tactics to use with tenants next week that I've used before. It's real-world negotiating and persuasion that you probably just aren't going to read about in any book, all right? When learning about how to deal with tenants, you're going to get a real appreciation for what your property manager does and why turnkey real estate investing is so smart. But this series is about DIYing for a change, doing it yourself. Tenants are the ones that control your income stream, and it's crucial that you know how to screen them and handle them, and it can create stress, no doubt about it. So next week, it's going to be gritty, it's even going to be funny, but more importantly, it will give you a lot of value in creating wealth for yourself. So don't go out and buy a fourplex this week, at least wait until you hear next week's show, okay? I'm Keith Weinhold. Don't quit your daydream.
You've been listening to Get Rich Education, telling you what the wealthy won't tell you about real estate and investing. If you enjoyed the show, please take a minute to visit iTunes and leave your comments.
Nothing on this show should be considered specific, personal, or professional advice. Please consult an appropriate tax, legal, real estate, financial, or business professional for individualized advice. Opinions of guests are their own. Information is not guaranteed. All investment strategies have the potential for profit or loss. The host is operating on behalf of Get Rich Education, LLC exclusively.